The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet town of Maplewood. The air was calm and people were just starting their day. Among them was a man named Daniel Carter. He lived alone in a small rented house near the park. Every morning he would sit by the window with a cup of coffee, staring out at the world as if trying to remember something that had slipped away from him. His life looked peaceful, but inside there was a deep emptiness. Daniel was a veteran. Years ago, he had served in the army during a rescue mission overseas. Something terrible had happened there, an explosion, a bright flash of light, and then nothing. When he woke up in a hospital far from home, he couldn't remember who he was. The doctors told him he had lost his memory because of head injuries. He didn't know his family, his friends, or even his own story. All he knew was his name, written on a tag they found in his uniform. For years, Daniel tried to rebuild a life from pieces. He got a small job helping at a community center. He was kind to everyone but quiet, almost as if he was afraid to speak too much. The townspeople liked him and respected him, but they all felt a sadness around him. He laughed sometimes, but his eyes always looked far away, like he was searching for someone in his memories. One weekend, the local veteran center organized an event for retired soldiers. They were showing how service dogs could help people with trauma and disabilities. Daniel volunteered to help set up chairs and tables. It wasn't unusual for him. He liked doing things that made others happy. As he worked, he heard the joyful barking of dogs being trained. Their handlers were demonstrating how these animals could help people stand, walk, or even calm their minds during panic attacks. Daniel smiled softly while watching. He had always loved dogs, though he didn't know why. Sometimes he dreamed about one. Golden fur, warm eyes, and the sound of barking in the middle of smoke and chaos. But every time he tried to remember more, the image faded like mist. The event began and people gathered around. The air was full of laughter and the sound of paws tapping the ground. Trainers introduced the dogs: Luna, Max, Bella, Hope. The last one caught Daniel's attention. Hope was a beautiful golden retriever with bright, intelligent eyes. She walked proudly beside her handler. But the moment her gaze met Daniel's, something changed. She stopped moving. The handler tugged gently on her leash, but Hope refused to move forward. She stared straight at Daniel, tail slowly wagging, her body trembling with excitement. Daniel looked around, confused. People began to notice. The handler smiled awkwardly and tried again, but the dog suddenly broke free from the leash and ran toward Daniel. Everyone gasped, but Hope didn't bark or jump. Instead, she stopped right in front of him, looked up into his face, and then lay down quietly at his feet. The whole place went silent. Daniel froze. He didn't know what to do. He stared at the dog lying across his shoes like she had found something she had been searching for all her life. Her eyes glistened and her tail thumped gently on the floor. He knelt down slowly, his heart pounding. "Hey there, girl," he whispered softly. His hand trembled as he reached out to touch her fur. It felt strangely familiar, warm, soft, comforting. He didn't know why, but tears began to form in his eyes. The handler hurried over, apologizing. "I'm so sorry, sir. She's never done this before." Daniel shook his head, unable to speak. "It's all right," he whispered. He looked at the golden retriever again. "What's her name?" "Her name's Hope," the handler said, still surprised. "She's one of our best trained dogs. I don't know why she's acting like this." Daniel smiled faintly at the name. Hope. Something deep inside him stirred when he heard it. He whispered the name again. Hope. And for a second a flash of memory appeared in his mind. Sand. A desert. The sound of shouting. Then a golden shape running toward him through smoke. He blinked hard and the image was gone. His heart raced, but he didn't understand what was happening. The rest of the people at the event were amazed. Some clapped lightly, thinking it was sweet. "Looks like she picked her favorite person," someone joked. Daniel smiled weakly, but inside he felt confused and frightened. Why did this dog feel so familiar? Why did he feel like he already knew her? When the event ended, Hope refused to leave Daniel's side. The handler tried calling her several times, but she only wagged her tail and stayed near him. Finally, Daniel helped guide her back to the handler, though the dog looked heartbroken as she walked away. Daniel watched her go, feeling an ache in his chest he couldn't explain. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the dog lying in front of him. He heard the echo of a voice, his own, calling her name in the middle of an explosion. He sat up in bed, sweating. "What is wrong with me?" he whispered. He walked to the window and looked out at the night sky. Somewhere deep down, he knew that this wasn't just a random meeting. That dog knew him. Somehow, some part of his past was connected to her. The next morning, Daniel went back to the Veteran Center, pretending he was there to return a tool he borrowed. But he was really hoping to see the dog again. As soon as he entered the building, he heard barking. Hope came running from the other room, tail wagging wildly, as if she had been waiting for him. She jumped slightly, but then calmed down and walked straight to him, pressing her head against his leg. The handler, a kind woman named Megan, shook her head in disbelief. "I don't know what it is about you, Mr. Carter," she said with a laugh. "She's usually very calm, but when you're around, she acts like she's known you forever." Daniel smiled but didn't know what to say. "Maybe she just likes me," he said quietly. Megan nodded. "Maybe," she said, but she looked thoughtful. She glanced down at the file in her hands, flipping through some papers. "It's strange, though," she added. "Hope was originally trained for a soldier with the same name as yours, Sergeant Daniel Carter. But that man was reported missing years ago." Daniel froze. His eyes widened and the room suddenly felt smaller. What did you just say?" he asked softly. Megan looked up, surprised by his tone. "I said she used to belong to a soldier named Sergeant Daniel Carter. You must have the same name. Small world, huh?" Daniel stared at her, unable to speak. His hands began to tremble. He looked down at Hope, who was now sitting quietly, looking up at him with those familiar eyes full of trust and recognition. His heart pounded. "No," he whispered. "Not small world. It can't be." He knelt beside her again, running his hand along her fur. More flashes came. Loud noise, darkness, Hope barking beside him, the smell of burning. His breathing became uneven. Megan noticed and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right, sir?" Daniel nodded weakly. I think I knew her," he said quietly. "A long time ago." Hope let out a soft sound like a sigh and rested her head on his knee. Daniel felt something inside him break open. For the first time in years, he didn't feel lost, he felt found. That night, as he walked home, Daniel looked at the stars above him and whispered the dog's name again. Hope. He didn't know how or why, but somehow, this loyal animal had found him again. Somewhere in his forgotten past, their story had begun, and now fate had brought them back together. He didn't yet understand what it meant, but deep down he knew this was the beginning of something life-changing. Daniel woke up early the next morning, still thinking about the golden retriever named Hope. Her face, her eyes, the way she had laid down in front of him, it all kept playing in his mind. He felt as if a door had opened inside his heart, but he couldn't see what was behind it. He sat quietly by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the light spread through the street. For years he had lived like a shadow of himself, never feeling fully alive. But now, because of one dog, something inside him was changing. By the time the clock struck 9, Daniel had made up his mind. He was going back to the Veteran Center. He told himself it was just to help out again, but deep inside he knew he wanted to see Hope. He needed to see her. When he reached the center, Megan, the trainer, smiled in surprise. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. You're here early again." Daniel smiled back, pretending to be casual. "I thought you might need help with the dogs again." Megan laughed softly. "You must really love them," Daniel nodded. "Especially one of them," he said under his breath. Before Megan could respond, Hope came running from the back room. Her tail wagged like crazy when she saw Daniel. She ran straight toward him and sat right in front of him, then gently laid down at his feet just like before. Daniel laughed softly, bending down to pat her head. "Hey girl," he whispered. "You remember me, don't you?" Megan looked amazed. "She doesn't do that with anyone else," she said. "It's like she knows you." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe she does." The rest of the morning passed quietly. Daniel helped clean the kennels, refill the food bowls, and watch the training sessions. But wherever he went, Hope followed. If he moved to another room, she walked behind him. If he sat down, she sat beside him. The other trainers laughed, calling her his shadow. But to Daniel, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like she was guarding something important. Later that day, Megan called Daniel over. "Can I show you something?" she asked. She led him into a small office filled with folders and photos of dogs with their assigned soldiers. She pulled out an old file labeled Hope Service Record. Inside were pictures of her during training, reports of missions, and a small photograph attached to the top page. Megan pointed at it. "Look," she said. Daniel froze. The photo showed Hope standing beside a soldier in uniform. The man had short brown hair, blue eyes, and a faint scar on his cheek. His name tag read Sergeant Daniel Carter. For a long moment, Daniel couldn't move. It felt as if his body turned to stone. He stared at the photo, unable to speak. His breathing grew shallow and his heart pounded hard in his chest. That's me," he whispered finally. His voice shook. Megan looked at him speechless. "Are you serious? That's you?" Daniel nodded slowly, his hand trembling as he touched the photo. "I think so," he said softly. "I don't remember much, but that scar, it's the same. And the uniform, the way she's looking at him, it's like she's looking at me now." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "Oh my God, this is incredible," she said quietly. "That means Hope was your dog before you went missing." Daniel sat down heavily in the chair, staring at the photograph. His mind felt like a storm. Images started flashing, dusty air, shouting, gunfire, and Hope running toward him through a cloud of smoke. He remembered falling, calling her name, and then darkness. His head began to ache, and he closed his eyes, trying to calm himself. Megan touched his arm gently. "Take your time," she said softly. "You don't have to remember it all at once." When he opened his eyes again, Hope was standing beside him, pressing her head against his leg. He smiled weakly. "You found me again, didn't you, girl?" he whispered. She wagged her tail gently as if saying yes. That night, Daniel walked home slowly, his mind still spinning. Every step he took felt heavier, with memories he couldn't quite reach. The air was cool and the streetlights glowed softly. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "I thought I was gone, but maybe I was just lost." At home, he sat at his kitchen table, staring at the photo Megan had printed for him. Hope looked exactly the same in it, calm, loyal, proud. He traced his finger over the image of his younger self. "So this is who I was," he said quietly. He wanted to feel happy, but instead he felt confused. He had been living under his own name all these years without even knowing who he truly was. That night, Daniel had dreams. He was back in the desert again, hearing explosions and shouting. He saw himself calling out orders, Hope running toward trapped soldiers. He saw her pulling someone out of a burning vehicle. Then came the flash of light, the pain, and everything went dark. When he woke up, his face was wet with tears. Hope's name echoed in his ears. The next day, Daniel went back to the Veteran Center again. Megan met him with a bright smile. "You won't believe this," she said. "I spoke to someone at the military records office. They confirmed that a Sergeant Daniel Carter was listed missing during a rescue mission 9 years ago. They never found a body, only his damaged ID tags. That's why you were declared dead." Daniel sat down slowly. "So I was gone? For 9 years?" Megan nodded. "Yes, and Hope was reassigned to another handler afterward. But she never bonded with anyone else the same way. It's like she was waiting." Daniel looked at the dog sitting beside him. She gazed up at him with those gentle brown eyes full of love. He bent down and whispered, "You were waiting for me, weren't you?" Hope wagged her tail and licked his hand softly. The story spread quickly around the Veteran Center. People were amazed by the miracle. They called it fate, that a lost soldier and his loyal dog had found each other again after so many years. But for Daniel, it wasn't about fate or miracles. It was about something even deeper. Love, loyalty, and the bond that time could not break. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Hope became inseparable. He took her for long walks in the park, watched her chase leaves, and sat with her at the lake. Each time she looked at him, he felt warmth in his heart. Slowly, small pieces of his memory began returning. Faces, voices, moments of laughter. He remembered the names of a few friends from his unit. But the biggest comfort was knowing that Hope had never forgotten him, even when he had forgotten himself. One afternoon, while sitting on a park bench with Hope by his side, Daniel saw a group of children playing. A little boy ran up to pet Hope, and she stayed perfectly still, wagging her tail kindly. The boy's mother smiled and said, "What a beautiful dog. She seems special." Daniel smiled proudly. "She is. She's more than a dog. She's my best friend." That night, Daniel wrote in a small notebook the counselor had given him. He wrote about the explosion, the recovery, the loneliness, and then about the day he met Hope again. His handwriting was slow and shaky, but his words came from the heart. "Maybe life gives us second chances," he wrote. Sometimes it sends an angel in fur. As weeks passed, Daniel began working part-time at the Veterans Center. He helped train new service dogs and shared his story to inspire others. Many people came just to see the famous pair, Daniel and Hope. Some cried when they heard their story. Others simply smiled, believing again in goodness and destiny. Every time Daniel told the story, he ended it the same way. I thought I had lost my life. But the truth is, it was waiting for me, in the shape of a golden retriever who refused to give up. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky orange, Daniel sat on his porch with Hope lying beside him. He looked at her and whispered, "You brought me back, girl." She lifted her head and looked at him with soft, loving eyes. He smiled and said, "Maybe tomorrow we'll find even more pieces of the past together." Hope wagged her tail gently, and Daniel felt peace settle over him for the first time in years. Daniel sat quietly at his desk that night, his hands resting on the open notebook. The small lamp beside him gave off a soft, golden light. Hope was lying near his feet, breathing gently in her sleep. The room felt peaceful, but Daniel's mind was full of questions. He kept thinking about what he had learned, the truth that Hope was his service dog before the explosion. It was strange and beautiful at the same time. He still couldn't believe that after 9 long years she had found him again, but even with this new understanding, many parts of his life were still missing. He could not remember his family, his home, or what had happened after the mission. His past was like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. The next day, Daniel went back to the Veterans Center hoping to find more answers. The staff greeted him warmly, calling him the miracle soldier. Some even asked to take pictures with Hope. Daniel smiled politely, but inside he still felt uneasy. He wanted to know who he really was before the accident. Megan noticed his silence and asked gently, "You're still trying to remember, aren't you?" Daniel nodded. "It's like I'm standing in front of a closed door," he said softly. "I know my memories are behind it, but I can't find the key." Megan thought for a moment. "Maybe Hope can help," she said. "Sometimes familiar places or sounds can bring memories back." She suggested taking Hope to an open training ground where soldiers used to practice with their service dogs. Daniel agreed, hoping it might help. That afternoon, they went to the training field on the outskirts of town. The place was quiet, surrounded by tall grass and a few old wooden fences. When Daniel stepped onto the dusty ground, something stirred inside him. Hope walked ahead, sniffing the air as if she too remembered something. Daniel watched as she ran toward a small wooden structure and barked twice before sitting down. A flash of memory hit him like lightning. He saw himself years ago standing in that same place throwing a ball and shouting, "Go, Hope!" He saw her running back proudly with the ball in her mouth. He remembered laughing, really laughing for the first time in years. The memory was so strong that tears filled his eyes. He dropped to his knees and Hope ran back to him, tail wagging, licking his hands as if to say, "You remember now." Megan, who had been watching quietly, smiled through tears. "She's unlocking your past piece by piece," she said. Daniel nodded, still emotional. "I think I remember that day," he said. "We were training before the mission." He looked at Hope with wonder. "You never gave up on me, did you?" The dog wagged her tail gently, her eyes full of warmth. Later, back at the center, Daniel met with a counselor who helped soldiers recover from trauma. Her name was Dr. Harris, and she listened patiently as Daniel shared everything that had happened. "Sometimes the mind protects itself by hiding painful memories," she explained. "When you lost your memory, it was your brain's way of protecting you from the pain of what happened." Daniel nodded slowly, understanding a little more. "But I think I want to face it now," he said. "If I want to move forward, I need to know what really happened." Over the next few days, Dr. Harris guided him through gentle memory exercises. Daniel would close his eyes, breathe deeply, and try to follow small flashes of memory. Hope would always sit beside him during these sessions, her presence keeping him calm. Slowly, small details began to return. Faces of soldiers in his unit, the smell of the desert air, the sound of laughter in the camp at night. He even began to remember his own voice giving commands during missions. Then one evening, a new memory surfaced. He remembered a radio call, a storm approaching, and a rescue mission they had been sent on. He saw himself and Hope searching through rubble to save trapped civilians. The sound of explosions grew louder in his mind and his breathing became shaky. Dr. Harris placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're safe," she said softly. Daniel opened his eyes, sweating. "The blast," he whispered. "It was a building. It collapsed right after I sent Hope to help a man trapped under debris. I think I was hit by falling bricks. After that, nothing." Dr. Harris smiled gently. "That was a brave thing to do," she said. "You saved lives, Daniel. That's something to remember with pride, not pain." As days passed, Daniel's story spread beyond the center. Local newspapers wanted to interview him. One article called it "A Soldier's Memory Found Through a Dog's Loyalty." People from across the town came to meet him. They brought letters, gifts, and even old photos from his service days that they found in military records. Some of the photos showed him and Hope together during training. Every picture helped him remember a little more. One afternoon, Megan walked into the room with a box in her hands. "These arrived from the base archives," she said. Inside the box were Daniel's old belongings, his badge, a few letters, and a small notebook. Daniel's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, he found his own handwriting. The first page had a short note that made him freeze. "If I don't make it home, tell Emily I love her." He read the name again and again. Emily. The word felt familiar but distant, like a song he used to know. Hope looked up at him as if sensing his confusion. "Do you remember her?" Megan asked quietly. Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not yet," he whispered. "But I think she was someone important." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The name Emily echoed in his mind. He sat on the porch looking at the stars, and Hope rested beside him. "Do you think she's still out there?" he asked softly. Hope lifted her head and looked into his eyes as if to say yes. Daniel smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time I find her." The next morning, he went back to the Veteran Center with a new purpose. He asked Megan and Dr. Harris if they could help him find out who Emily was. They agreed and began checking through old records. After a few days, they found something. A contact listed as next of kin Emily Carter, wife. Daniel's heart raced as he read it. He had a wife. The realization left him speechless. Megan placed a hand on his arm. "We can try to locate her," she said softly. "But only if you're ready." Daniel took a deep breath. "I think I am," he said. As the team started searching for Emily's location, Daniel took Hope for long walks each evening. Every step with her felt like a step closer to his past. Sometimes he would stop by the lake and look at his reflection in the water, wondering if Emily would still recognize him after all these years. He wasn't sure what he would say to her or if she even wanted to see him again. But deep down, he felt that he needed to try. One evening, while sitting by the water, Daniel whispered, "If I ever see her again, I'll tell her thank you for waiting even when she thought I was gone." Hope wagged her tail gently and placed her paw on his knee, as if to say she believed he would find her. A few days later, Megan rushed into the center holding her phone. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "We found her. Emily Carter. She's living in another state now. She works as a teacher." Daniel felt the world go still. For a moment, he couldn't speak. "She's alive," he whispered. "After all this time." Megan nodded with a smile. "She never remarried," she said softly. "She thought you were gone, but she kept your things all these years." Daniel sat down, holding his head in his hands. Tears ran down his face, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were of hope. Hope that maybe, after all these years, he could make his life whole again. He looked at the golden retriever sitting beside him. "Hope," he said quietly, "you helped me remember who I am. Now maybe you'll help me find her too." The dog wagged her tail, eyes shining with loyalty and love. That night, Daniel packed a small bag. He looked at the old photograph of himself with Hope and the note mentioning Emily. His heart was full of emotions, fear, joy, and gratitude. As he turned off the light, he whispered to himself, "Tomorrow I begin the journey home." The morning light poured gently through the window as Daniel packed his small travel bag. He moved slowly, carefully folding his clothes, placing his old notebook and Hope's leash on top. Hope sat near the door, watching him with curious eyes. She seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. Daniel looked at her and smiled softly. "We're going to find Emily," he said in a calm voice. "It's time to go home." It had been a long night for him. He hadn't slept much. His heart was full of mixed emotions, nervousness, excitement, fear, and hope. For days he had imagined what it would be like to meet Emily again. Would she recognize him? Would she forgive him for disappearing all those years ago? He didn't know, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to see her. Megan helped him arrange the trip. She gave him a printed address and smiled warmly. She lives in a quiet town called Cedar Hill, she said. I called the local veterans office there. They confirmed her contact details. But remember, Daniel, don't expect too much too fast. Take it one step at a time. Daniel nodded. I understand. Thank you for everything, he said. Megan knelt down and hugged Hope. Take care of him, girl, she whispered. Hope wagged her tail as if promising she would. As Daniel boarded the bus, he looked out the window at the passing streets. Every mile felt like a memory returning. The sound of the engine hummed softly, and Hope lay quietly beside his feet. People smiled at the sight of the golden retriever sitting calmly with her head on his knee. Some even recognized him from the newspaper story. One elderly man said, You're the soldier, right? The one who found his dog again? Daniel smiled humbly. Yes, he replied. And now she's helping me find someone else. The journey took several hours. As they passed fields, small towns, and quiet rivers, Daniel's mind wandered. He thought about the name Emily again and again. Bits of memory started to appear. Her laughter, the way she used to call his name, the sound of her voice reading a letter to him before he left for duty. He couldn't remember her face clearly, but he could feel her kindness. He held on to that feeling like it was a light guiding him home. When the bus finally stopped in Cedar Hill, the sun was already setting. The town was peaceful, filled with small houses, blooming gardens, and children playing on sidewalks. Daniel stepped off the bus, holding Hope's leash, his heart pounding. He looked around, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air. For the first time in many years, he felt close to home. He walked slowly through the streets until he reached the address Megan had written down. It was a small white house with blue shutters and a front porch filled with flower pots. The scent of roses filled the air. Hope stopped at the gate and wagged her tail softly as if recognizing the place. Daniel froze. His hands trembled as he stood there staring at the house. This was our home, he whispered. I can feel it. He walked up the path with slow steps. His legs felt weak and his heart was racing so fast he could barely breathe. He stopped at the porch and looked through the window. Inside, he saw a woman sitting at a wooden table reading a book. Her hair had streaks of gray now, but her posture was calm and graceful. She looked peaceful, but her eyes seemed a little sad, like someone who had learned to live with loss. Daniel didn't know what to do. He stood frozen, unable to knock. Hope looked up at him and gave a small bark, as if encouraging him. Daniel smiled nervously. You're right, he whispered. It's time. He lifted his hand and knocked gently on the door. The woman looked up, surprised. She slowly walked toward the door and opened it halfway. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel stood there, hat in his hand, his eyes full of emotion. Emily? He said softly. Her face went pale. She stared at him, her hand trembling. Who are you? She whispered. It's me, he said. Daniel, her eyes widened. The book fell from her hand onto the floor. She covered her mouth, unable to speak. Tears filled her eyes. No, she whispered. That can't be Daniel. Daniel died. Daniel shook his head slowly, his voice shaking. I thought so too, but I didn't. I lost my memory. I've been trying to find you. Emily stepped forward, still in disbelief. How is this possible? She asked in a trembling voice. Daniel didn't answer with words. Instead, he stepped aside slightly, and Hope moved forward. The moment Emily saw the golden retriever, she gasped. Hope, she said in shock. The dog wagged her tail, then walked up to Emily and gently rested her head on her hand. Emily's knees grew weak. She dropped to the floor, holding the dog close, sobbing softly. Daniel knelt beside her. She found me, he said quietly. And because of her, I found you. Emily looked at him with tears streaming down her cheeks. She reached out slowly, touching his face, tracing the familiar scar on his cheek. It really is you, she whispered. You're alive. Daniel nodded, unable to hold back his tears. I don't remember everything, but I remember you. I remember your name, your voice. I wrote your name in my notebook before the mission. Emily smiled through her tears. I kept your things, she said. Your letters, your photos. I never stopped hoping that somehow you'd come back. They sat there on the porch for a long time, holding each other while Hope lay beside them quietly, her head resting between them as if guarding their reunion. The evening air was cool and the sound of crickets filled the silence. For Daniel, time seemed to stop. After years of being lost, he was finally home. Later that night, Emily made tea for both of them. They sat at the kitchen table, just like they used to years ago. The house smelled of chamomile and warmth. On the wall were old photos, pictures of Daniel in his uniform, pictures of them smiling together before the war. Daniel looked at them quietly, his eyes full of emotion. "I wish I remembered all of this," he said softly. Emily reached across the table and held his hand. "You don't have to remember everything," she said gently. "You're here now. That's enough." Hope lay on the floor near them, her eyes half closed. Every once in a while she lifted her head and looked at them as if making sure they were okay. Before going to bed, Emily showed Daniel a small wooden box she had kept hidden in her drawer. Inside were his old dog tags, a folded letter, and a photograph of the three of them, Daniel, Emily, and Hope, standing in front of their house years ago. Daniel held the photo close to his chest. "I can't believe I almost lost this life," he whispered. Emily smiled softly. "You didn't lose it," she said. "You just found your way back a little late." That night Daniel lay awake for a long time. The room felt familiar, though he couldn't remember sleeping there before. Hope lay beside the bed and Emily rested in the next room. The sound of the clock ticking filled the silence. For the first time in years, Daniel felt peace in his heart. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Hope. You brought me home." In the days that followed, Daniel began helping Emily around the house. They took walks together every evening, with Hope trotting beside them. The neighbors, who once believed Emily's husband had died in the war, were stunned to see him alive. Some brought flowers and warm meals, saying it was like a miracle. Daniel smiled humbly and said, "It was all because of her," pointing to Hope. Every day, new pieces of memory returned. He remembered their wedding day, the songs they used to listen to, and the promise he made before leaving for duty, to always come back. He couldn't keep that promise for many years, but now, because of his loyal dog, he finally had. As the days turned into weeks, the pain of the past began to fade. The house that had once been filled with silence now echoed with laughter again. Daniel often sat on the porch in the evenings watching the sunset, his hand resting on Hope's back. Emily would bring him tea, and together they would watch the light fade slowly behind the hills. One evening, Daniel said softly, "I don't know why life gave me a second chance, but I'll spend the rest of it being grateful, for you and for her." Emily smiled and said, "Sometimes love just waits for the right time to find its way back." And with that, Daniel finally felt complete. After years of darkness, he had found his way home, not just to a house, but to his heart. The morning light fell softly through the curtains, painting the room in a warm glow. Daniel woke up to the sound of birds outside and the soft breathing of Hope near the bed. It had been a few weeks since he had reunited with Emily, yet each morning still felt like a new beginning. He looked around the small bedroom, smiling faintly. There were framed photos on the dresser now, pictures of the three of them taken recently. In each one, Hope sat proudly in the middle, her golden fur shining in the sunlight. Daniel sat up slowly, stretching his arms. He felt stronger now, both in his body and in his heart. The nightmares that once haunted him had started to fade. Hope had a way of keeping them away. She would rest her head near his hand whenever he tossed in his sleep, and somehow that small gesture was enough to calm him. Emily walked into the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning," she said softly. "Did you sleep well?" Daniel smiled. "I did," he replied. "Thanks to her." He looked down at Hope, who wagged her tail in response. Emily laughed gently. "She's your guardian angel in fur," she said. They sat together on the porch, sipping coffee while the world slowly woke up around them. The sun rose above the hills, and the golden light touched the leaves of the trees. Daniel took a deep breath of the fresh air. "I used to take mornings like this for granted," he said. "Now every sunrise feels like a gift." Emily smiled at him, her eyes warm. "It is a gift," she said softly. "You came back to us. That's all that matters." Over the next few months, Daniel began to help more at the local veteran center in Cedar Hill. The staff there had heard about his story, and invited him to speak to other soldiers who were struggling with memory loss or trauma. At first, he wasn't sure he could do it, but when he looked down at Hope sitting faithfully beside him, he found courage. He began to share his journey, not just about the war, but about the emptiness, the confusion, and finally, the miracle that led him home. Every time he told the story, people listened in silence. Many of them had tears in their eyes, and at the end he always said the same thing. Sometimes healing doesn't come from medicine. It comes from love, loyalty, and the heart of a friend who never gives up. Hope became a small celebrity in the community. Children loved her and veterans admired her. She would often accompany Daniel to the center, lying near his chair while he spoke. The sight of her calm eyes gave comfort to many who still carried their own pain. Daniel knew she wasn't just his savior. She was a symbol of faith for everyone she met. One day, a local reporter visited them to write a feature story for the newspaper. She took pictures of Daniel, Emily, and Hope sitting together in their backyard. When the story was published, it spread quickly. Letters began arriving from people across the country, soldiers, families, and even strangers who had read about the man who found his lost life through his dog. Some wrote to say the story gave them hope. Others said it reminded them to never stop believing in miracles. Daniel read every letter carefully. Some made him cry. Others made him smile. "All this happened because of you," he said to Hope one evening. She wagged her tail and laid her head on his lap, as if understanding every word. Life in Cedar Hill settled into a gentle rhythm. Daniel and Emily spent their evenings walking through the park, with Hope running happily ahead of them. Sometimes they would sit on a bench near the lake, watching the water shimmer under the moonlight. Those moments were quiet but full of meaning. Daniel often said, "I used to think my life ended the day of that explosion, but maybe it just began again in a different way." One afternoon, Daniel received a letter from the Army's Veteran Affairs Department. It confirmed that his service record had been fully restored and that he would receive recognition for bravery. He read the letter slowly, then looked up at Emily and smiled. "It's not about medals," he said softly. "It's about remembering that what we did mattered." Emily nodded proudly. "You deserve this," she said. "And so does she." She looked at Hope, who was lying peacefully nearby. A few days later, the local veteran center organized a small ceremony. Daniel stood on the stage with Hope by his side as the crowd clapped warmly. The officer presenting the medal smiled and said, "This one's for both of you, for courage, loyalty, and the bond that brought two souls back home." Daniel bent down and placed the medal gently on Hope's collar. "She earned it," he said with a smile. The crowd cheered and Emily wiped tears from her eyes. After the ceremony, Daniel felt lighter. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "We did it, girl." Hope barked softly as if answering, "We did." Months passed and the seasons began to change. The leaves turned golden and fell gently from the trees. Daniel started keeping a small diary again, writing down his thoughts each night. His words were simple but full of gratitude. In one entry he wrote, "Sometimes life takes away your memories so it can give you a new story. Mine began again the day a golden retriever laid down at my feet." One chilly evening, Daniel sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset. Emily brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. Hope lay at their feet, her head resting on Daniel's boot. They didn't speak much, just enjoyed the peace around them. The sky turned orange, pink, and then deep blue. Daniel turned to Emily and said quietly, "Do you ever wonder why she found me after so many years?" Emily smiled softly. "Maybe because love doesn't forget," she said. "Even when we lose our way, it finds us again." Daniel nodded, feeling her words deep in his heart. He looked down at Hope and whispered, "You found me when I didn't even know who I was." The dog looked up at him and wagged her tail gently, her eyes full of trust and love. As night settled, Daniel and Emily went inside. Hope followed them, curling up at her usual spot near their bed. Before turning off the light, Daniel knelt beside her and stroked her fur. "Thank you for bringing me home," he said softly. "You saved me in more ways than one." Hope lifted her head and gently licked his hand before closing her eyes. Daniel smiled, knowing she understood. The next morning, Daniel woke up before sunrise. He sat by the window, watching the light slowly touch the world outside. Hope came and rested her head on his knee just like she always did. He whispered, Every day feels like a second chance, doesn't it? She wagged her tail in answer. From that day on, Daniel and Emily made it their mission to help others who had lost their way. They started a small program at the Veterans Center that paired rescue dogs with soldiers who needed emotional healing. Daniel called it Project Hope. The name felt perfect. Each dog they trained carried a bit of the story that began with hope, the story of loyalty, courage, and the power of love. Years later, when people asked Daniel about his life, he would always smile and say, "I once lost everything, even myself. But a dog found me, a woman loved me, and together, they gave me my life back." And every evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Daniel, Emily, and Hope would sit quietly on the porch together. No words were needed. The silence between them was full of love, gratitude, and peace. Sometimes Daniel would close his eyes and remember the moment Hope first laid down in front of him, the moment his life began again. He would smile and whisper to himself, "She didn't just wake my memory, she woke my heart." Hope would lift her head, sensing his voice, and rest it gently on his leg. That was her way of saying she was happy too. In that quiet little town, their story became a gentle reminder to everyone who heard it, that no matter how lost someone feels, love will always find a way home.